This show is sponsored in part by the Missouri Automobile Dealers Association. New car dealers are the heart of Missouri, with over 20,000 employees in hundreds of local communities across the state.
Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics, the show where we exclusively discuss issues that impact our state. This week, we're very pleased to have as our first guest on the show, Senator Eric Schmitt, Republican State Senator from Southwest St. Louis County. Senator, welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics.
Great to be here.
You've been in the news recently with your proposal to reform some of the municipal courts in the state. Can you explain to a person that does not understand this condition up there that you're trying to address, what is the problem you're trying to fix?
Well, I think for far too long we've had way too many municipalities too reliant on traffic ticket revenue for their cities. And what it's done is it's propped up a lot of bloated governments. And you've got a situation, this exists statewide. It's probably more pronounced in St. Louis County and has gotten more attention recently in the aftermath of some of the Ferguson discussion that we're now having on a serious level. But you've got, for example, in St. Louis County, 14 municipalities where their single biggest source of revenue is from traffic tickets. You've got 22% of the state's population in this region, but yet 50% of the tickets that are issued. You've got 81 municipal courts in St. Louis County alone. That's 61 more than the next largest circuit in the whole state. So clearly, we've got a system that is pushing more and more people into poverty. You've got a situation where somebody may miss a court date for a traffic ticket and end up in jail. And we've created a modern day debtor prison. And I think for us to, as conservatives and across the political spectrum, to try to right this wrong, to call out an injustice, which is exactly what this is the right thing for us to do. So my bill, right now there's a law, Max Creek Law, which is named after actually a small rural town in Missouri that was essentially finding new and innovative ways to create speed traps and fund, bloated government. Right now, no city can take in more than 30% of their revenue from traffic tickets and fines. This would lower that to 10%, and I think bring real accountability. Government doesn't exist, and it shouldn't exist, to extract more and more from its citizens, and that's exactly what's happened now.
So if the municipality has over 10% of their revenue derived from these petty tickets, what happens to that money? What happens to that city?
Well, what is supposed to happen right now is a couple of things. One is it's a self-reporting system, so we need to look at that. The other thing is the overage over that 30% is supposed to be turned over to state education fund. That's not happening. And then that municipal court is also supposed to lose jurisdiction. So I think as we move this bill forward, and I think it's going to be a priority for us to move this bill forward to try to right some of these wrongs, certainly open to any opinions or input that people have as what we can do to bolster that enforcement mechanism. But right now, I think, again, I'm heartened by the fact that across the political spectrum, you've got people who see a problem and want to do something about it. The best example I can give for people who live in the St. Louis metro area is St. Ann. I grew up in North County. My grandmother still lives in St. Ann. When Northwest Plaza was Northwest Plaza, there weren't cops on Highway 70. Now the mall's gone, and that has been used to supplant revenue that has been lost. And that's just not the way government is supposed to operate. And it's caused, I think, a breakdown in the way people view their government, but also with the court system. And I think it's, as somebody that values the Constitution, the courts are there to protect people's rights. You've got another situation, Scott had mentioned too, where a lot of these municipal courts, and these 81 in St. Louis County, 40% of them don't allow kids in the courtroom. And that makes it difficult for people to be there, having to make the decision between paying a fine or paying a babysitter. We need the courts to be more accessible.
So, but while this may be the more acute part of the problems in St. Louis County, this is statewide, right? I think we've all run into speed traps, not just in St. Louis. We've run into them in rural Missouri and all over the state. This will apply to each municipality statewide. That's right. And there's, again, the law is named after Max Creek, which is not a municipality in St. Louis County, which I think gives a context here that these exist across our state, and we need to start calling them out. We should not be empowering and have taxation by citation, which is essentially what we've got now with a lot of these municipalities. Not all of them, but I think some of them aren't needed cities. Do you think they're not an actual city that needs to be constituted in the state?
Well, I think the right thing for us to do is start with the question, which is, are you deriving more and more of your revenue to supplant other revenue that's been lost by these speed traps. And if we start there, I think the solutions can follow. I certainly think there's a better way to do this. And again, what's happened is we've created these debtor prisons. And I think that we need to take a good hard look at the size and the scope of some of these municipal governments that, again, are existing and continuing to prop themselves up off the back of people who sometimes can least afford it.
When you look at the issue, the situation in Ferguson that I think shocks the entire state, how does this law begin to affect some of the core causes that brought some of those issues on earlier in the year?
Well, I think I think there's been a breakdown in some ways because some of these municipalities, particularly near North County, I mean, Calverton Park, for example, derives over 2/3 of its revenue from traffic tickets. And when that interaction between a police officer and citizens is in that context, and then people feel like they're not being treated justly in that municipal court system, it does lead to a breakdown of trust sometimes. But I will also tell you, I am also encouraged by the support of the people that I've talked to in law enforcement. A lot of the police officers, they did not go to the police academy to write these traffic tickets so some city manager can meet budget that year. They went into law enforcement so that they can do the things that they believe in, community policing. And I think this would free up more time for those officers to spend more of their time developing those relationships in the community and, again, reestablishing some of that trust. But at the end of the day, this is also about the size and scope of government and how much it's taking in a backdoor way, quite frankly, from its citizens.
You know, Ferguson's been on a lot of people's mind throughout the state, especially in St. Louis. Earlier in the month, the MHDC allocated some tax credits to begin some development in North County that's much needed, and they received a lot of praise over your proposal. What else can be done in the legislative session to help try to address some of these issues and kind of a more fair government?
Well, I think we need to have broader and better economic opportunities. I think that we need to continue, as chair of the Economic Committee, I'm committed to trying to do everything we can to move our economy forward. I do think that there are a lot of things that we can do. But I think a central issue also, one thing that we tried to tackle last year, and we did pass a bill, a bipartisan bill, to, for the first time in a long time, really take a good hard look at our education system. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's rather to say that, you know, in some of the urban school districts that have been deemed to be unaccredited, there ought to be some different options available for those students so that they can succeed, that they do have real opportunity. And I'm hopeful that we can work in a bipartisan way to get that done. We are waiting for the governor to chime in here. He's given really no input, no leadership on this issue, but we'll continue to keep it front of mind. I think as we look at how we can improve the conditions all across this state, but specifically in an area like North County, I think education's a key.
This will be your last legislative session. You're announced you're running for state treasurer. Give us an update on how the campaign's going.
It's been a great start. I am term limited in 2016 and have really enjoyed my time in the Senate. And as I took a look at, you know, the things that I've worked on, I've spent a lot of time on. I've been consistent with my my advocacy for private sector job creation, protecting taxpayers, and I've been a leader and an author of two of the biggest tax cuts in the history of the state. And we saw that happen over a veto override last year. And so the Treasurer's Office is a platform to continue to advocate for the taxpayers. I grew up in a very middle-class family. I firmly believe that people should be allowed to keep more of their own money, and that's how we're going to grow our economy in a meaningful way. And the Treasurer's Office is a way for me to continue that work. Public service has been something that for a long time I felt very, very important thing for me to do, and so this is a way for me to continue to serve.
Speaking of the state treasury, your campaign treasury has done well, and you have no announced opponent as of now?
Yeah, I've been really encouraged by the support we've gotten all across the state from people, and it means a lot to me as somebody that you know, with a young family and believing in what I do, and I still feel like there's more to offer the state. And so there has been a lot of support. I'm encouraged by that, and I am the only announced candidate from either party.
Last question. What kind of year will 2016 be for the Republican Party or the Democrat Party? Who do you see having the advantage going in?
I think, you know, time will tell. Things change quickly in politics, but what's encouraging in Missouri, I think Missouri is a state that believes that the government should live within its means, and I think the candidates that can articulate that message will be successful in 2016. 2014, of course, the last election cycle was very good for Republicans. And I think what's also encouraging, some of the policies that we've taken up, like tax cuts, not a single incumbent Republican legislator lost their seat in 2014. So there's more work for us to do. 2016
seems like 16 could be a good year.
I hope so.
Senator Schmitt, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back with This Week in Missouri Politics Opinion Leader Roundtable.
I always dreamed of making music for a living.
500 million people today can't see clearly enough to bring their dreams into focus. They have correctable vision issues, but lack access to quality vision care.
Imagine not being able to read a book or the lyrics to a song.
One site is committed to eradicating this crisis in our lifetime, here at home and a world away.
Join me. Get involved with One Site. Everyone deserves to see their dreams come true.
When we're very young, we don't even really know what we're dealing with. ADHD is complex, it's complicated, and it was a struggle for me, but when you're an adult, you can actually sit down and say, okay, this is what I suffer from, how do I handle it? You can't run from it your whole life, you have to embrace it.
Have concerns about ADHD? Find out more. Take a quiz at ownYourADHD.com to help recognize the symptoms of ADHD. Then talk with your doctor.
It's your ADHD. Own it.
And welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. We're now joined by our This Week Opinion Maker panel. First off, Jeff Aboussie, the Executive Secretary-Treasurer of the St. Louis Building Trades Council. Shelley Keeney, the State Representative from Southeast Missouri. Jane Dueker, a partner at Stinson Leonard and the most active Twitter feed in state politics. And now that John Lampe's retired, Joe Lakin, the Vice President of Public Relations with Victory Enterprises and the best hair in state politics. So, Joe, we'll start with you. The committee investigating how the governor handled Ferguson met last week and convened. What do you see coming to the committee?
You know, I think it'll be interesting to see what the legislature comes up with. I think there are some very legitimate questions about the way it was handled. I think you have very competent leadership in both parties. And in both houses of the legislature that are going to be looking at this. I think the deployment of the National Guard, the night of the verdict, and a number of other things since then I think are going to be looked at, and I think the public deserves to have some answers.
Jane, you're an attorney. What do you expect to come of this?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on which direction they're going. I think it would be better for everybody if there was sort of a list of topics and say, okay, this is what we want to know. And so then the governor and other state officials can say, okay, if it's money you want to talk about, how the money was spent, if it was how the decision was made, and I think if there's at least a list of topics, then everybody can sort of look at and say, okay, if these are legitimate, then those questions should be answered. But I think it would behoove everyone to have a list and to know exactly what information we're seeking and why. I think the public would want to know that it's not just a political witch hunt and that it's not just non-productive, and that we know ahead of time sort of what this is going to do and what it's for.
Representative, you'll be reading this report when it's done, I guess. What would you consider to be a success? What would make this worthwhile?
I think it's very important that the committee take a methodical, timely approach rather than jump right out of the gate trying to get answers immediately. Take the time to listen and hear from those who are involved at all different levels on both sides of the issue and really think about it and ask the hard questions and get to the bottom of the situation, the events that have unfolded up to this point, and then take their time to come up with a report in the end to submit back to the legislature.
The political end of this, though, this is sort of another coming out party for Senator Schaefer with his Attorney General run. It seems like now the spotlight will be foisted back on him. Joe, what do you think this does for a primary opposition to him, or how can he make this and get all it's worth?
Yeah, I think in the legislature you have opportunities to kind of showcase your skills, and I think it'll be interesting to watch and see how he's able to maneuver this. I know he's been has dealt with some very heavy issues in the legislature previously. It'll be interesting to see how it's handled.
Jeff, you've seen a bunch of these come and go. What would make this any different than the other ones we saw?
Well, I think that we have to look at this event that happened in Ferguson, and we have to respond quickly to rebuilding that community. I mean, we saw what happened in Joplin when they were hit by a tornado. I think the biggest strength to dealing with that issue and helping those people in that community is a rapid response. So I think first and foremost, we have to look at how we rebuild that community and to get with that program, whether it be working with the Missouri Division of Insurance to make sure that claims get handled, if they're due to be paid, if the legislature has to create a funding mechanism to rebuild that community, coordination with, you know, with St. Louis County. But I think the whole thing is that we need to act quickly to restore the things, the basic needs of the mom and pops that live in that community. And that's what I think has been so devastating.
And I think politically, I think if the committee is just about looking at the past and just about sort of retribution, I think it will lose steam relatively quickly. But I think if it's focused on, look, the reason we're looking at this stuff is because we have to look forward and because we have to rebuild this community and make sure that we, you know, never let this happen again or figure out what we can do differently so this doesn't happen again. And I think that would help the committee as well, is to make sure that it's looking forward for a forward-looking purpose and not just retribution.
Well, Jane, now that the midterms are over a month old, it's clearly time to start talking about 2016. And so,
it's never too early.
From the Democratic side, who do you see? Do you see a real challenger to Hillary Clinton this time? And then who worries you on the Republican side?
Well, I think that, you know, obviously I think Hillary's out there, and I think she's got a lot of steam. I think there's some discussion maybe about Elizabeth Warren, and I think, you know, I think maybe the far left of the party is thinking that maybe we need somebody a little bit further to the left. But right now I don't see any of it as being very serious. So I think there's discussion at best, but right now it seems like, you know, Hillary is going forward, and I think we realize as a party that, you know, to unify ahead of time. We just went through one where it was Hillary and Barack Obama, and that was, you know, that was challenging to heal after that. And I think we sort of decide, hey, if we can go behind one and do it, that might be the better route.
Joe, your firm is trending quickly in Republican politics. What do you see on the Republican side? Is there a front runner yet? Is there a likely winner?
Yeah, you know, I don't know that at this point there is a front runner. I think as we've seen the last few election cycles and Republican primaries, I don't think you want to be the front runner at this point. You know, I'm not unbiased, but I think Rand Paul is the kind of candidate that can really broaden the party. I think he changes the national map and brings younger voters to the table, and I think can really shake things up for the party.
Representative, who can win Missouri?
Gosh, well, no doubt about it. Jeb Bush has received a lot of attention this past week just with his announcements in the media. But I think when you're looking at Missouri, looking at Senator Cruz's campaign, and the fact that he has hired Jeff Rose, firm right here in Missouri, who has had a lot of experience building grassroots, reaching out to conservative Republicans across the state. And I think that will be something to watch as we move forward. Not only that, but we saw the amount of momentum that Ron Paul received last cycle. His supporters with those of some of the maybe more Democratic, liberal-leaning who are not so excited with going the same direction as President Obama. Maybe they're looking for someone a little more libertarian-minded, and they might look to someone, like Joe said, like a Rand Paul. So I think it's most definitely too early to see, but I think there's a whole lot out there that really could come and maybe throw a little bit of a wrench into things from the normal pattern that we've seen in the past.
Jeff Aboussie, is there a candidate that Labor likes right now better than any other ones?
Well, I got to believe that Labor is a fan of definitely Hillary Clinton. I think Elizabeth Warren, I would make a bet that she does not get in this race. But one thing that Missouri politics that I think will make Hillary play a significant role in Missouri is that if we remember back when the Todd Akin Claire McCaskill battle took part. It energized women in the state. I think you're going to see a woman lead this ticket on the Democratic side. I think you're going to see the female base in the state play a big role and see a presidential candidate actually play in Missouri, where before they tended to gravitate away from our state.
Yeah, Jane, it has seemed like Missouri has become less and less of a swing state. Is Hillary Clinton someone that could put it back in that column?
I think if there's anyone that I can see right now in the field, it would be her. I mean, she just has the machine. She has pedigree. I mean, Missourians, you know, especially Democrats, still like Bill Clinton. So I think she could energize, and I do think the Year of the Woman thing shouldn't be underestimated here in Missouri because, you know, we've got a hopeful on the Republican side in the gubernatorial race in Catherine Hanaway. So I think that could be a factor that could play in a lot of different ways, which would make it very interesting. And, you know, for my purposes as a Politico, I like to see as much activity in Missouri as possible. Bring as much money, both sides. Let's make it real interesting. So I think that could happen this time. And I think I will be happy to see, I don't think Hillary will abandon Missouri, which I think is great. And I think it's great for Missourians, both sides, and for us to be part of the debate.
Joe, no one's mentioned the name Chris Christie. Is that because he's probably not a front-running candidate?
You know, I think Christie is a tremendous candidate. I think he's a guy who's won a blue state. He's the kind of guy that, you know, I believe could win some blue states nationally. And there's no secret Republicans need to broaden the map and win some states that have historically gone Democrat. You know, I think with Jeb Bush in the race, I think that sucks a lot of the wind out of the room for another candidate that's viewed as establishment. So it'll be interesting to see if he still runs.
If you had to pick a favorite right now, who'd it be? Your favorite?
Rand Paul.
Representative?
Too early to say.
Jeff, I know you'll just say.
I'm Hillary, so.
Hillary.
You're ready for Hillary?
I'm ready for Hillary.
Awesome. Representative, the legislature reconvenes next month. There was a super majority last year. I guess it's like a super duper majority for the Republicans this year.
Something like that.
What issues do you think that super duper majority will address that's facing the state?
Most definitely, the events in Ferguson will be at the forefront of everyone's mind as we go back into session in January. From the discussion that I've had with many of the other representatives, there is definitely an agreement that we want to make sure we continue to support law enforcement, but we also are very open to hearing if there are improvements that can be made. You know, whether it's body cameras for law enforcement officials, whether it's, you know, discussions about the amount of the use of force and our tactics there. So I think that will kind of be, you know, on the forefront of everyone's mind as we move into other issues. But without a doubt, as we have increased our majority, I think the labor issues, and I know Jeff probably hates to hear that, but they will come up. Paycheck protection, right to work, those most definitely are issues that the conservative base of the Republican Party want to see in Missouri now with supermajorities, and I think they will come up.
Jeff, I had a question for you. Some of these Republican districts that are now Republican that weren't before, there's a lot of labor in those districts. Do you think being a pro-labor Republican is more in vogue, and do you think that inside that caucus, the larger numbers of pro-labor Republicans might want some of those issues not to be the first thing that's addressed?
Well, I think you're right. I don't think they want those to be the first thing to possibly divide a caucus like Representative saw last year. I think there's more important things to work on, but I think what has become more in vogue is to really drill down to these union rank and file people to see who they're really voting for. And I think as you get out into the rural areas, and there is still some union density out there, especially in the construction fields, that travel all the way to the big cities to work. These people are constituents of Representative. And, you know, they made their voices heard last year. And while they may have even voted for those legislators, I anticipate that to continue, that they make their voice, that they may have voted a Republican ballot, but they're also deeply concerned about anti-worker legislation. And I think the grassroots game will continue on.
Joe, we just had Senator Schmitt on talking about his municipal court reform proposal. Where do you see that going?
You know, from everything I can see, I think it has broad support. You know, I think you'll probably see a number of municipalities come out opposed to it, but I think it's something that probably will receive broad bipartisan support. I think it's something that's viewed as having a direct impact on Ferguson. I think with he and I believe Representative Kurtman handling the bill in the House, I think you'll see quite a bit of support for it.
Jane, last session ended with a lot of talk about the franchise law and that you have to have an actual dealership to buy a car in Missouri for different reasons. It seemed like the Nixon administration read the law and decided we're not going to follow that, we'll just write our own, kind of like the president did with amnesty. What do you see? Where do you see that issue unfolding?
You know, I don't think it's over. I think there's going to be a lot more discussion about it. I think, you know, here we are going into the end of, you know, Governor Nixon's term, and so he may be a little bit. It'll be interesting. He'll either be more aggressive in doing sort of what he wants to do, sort of with what we've seen with the president, or he may get more reticent and really decide, you know, those issues that he wants to focus on. I don't know if that's going to be top. I don't know if that's a hill he wants to die on. I don't know if that's a battle he wants to take on. It'll be interesting to see how far up the chain that might go. But, I mean, I suspect that Ferguson, along with the legislature, will be a top priority in making sure that we do things, you know, to help Ferguson. And You know, and I think the court's bill is a good idea. I think the devil's in the details. I think you don't want to have unintended consequences with the bill, and so the devil is in the details, how it's defined, what it in cases. But I also think that the courts are a symptom, not the underlying problem, and the underlying problem is whether...
Who's going to stand up for these speed traps, though, really? I mean, who's going to stand up and say these speed traps are necessary?
Oh, no. And I don't think it's necessarily about just speed traps. I mean, the idea is, what is operating revenue? What is the fundamental core of how these municipalities survive? A lot of people believe, rightly so, that there are too many of them, and it's inefficient, and it ends up, different set of rules, it's arbitrary, but there has to be some discussion about the fundamental municipal structure in Missouri, and more specifically in St. Louis County. And so I'm hoping that Representative Deal, Speaker Deal, has a bill that talks about, the things that should be included in what a municipality should have before they're allowed to stay incorporated. And so I think those fundamental discussions are important as well.
Joe, do you see a parallel between the president kind of deciding he'll just write his own law, and now Governor Nixon deciding he'll just write his own law and say the franchise law doesn't apply?
I do think I for one am supportive of a lot of these considered disruptive industries that are kind of breaking through, bringing a new approach. That being said, I think the Missouri auto dealers feel very strongly that the law is written in a way that really there isn't a whole lot of wiggle room. So while I think a lot
of conservatives thought that about the immigration laws too, until the president disagreed.
That's correct.
Last topic. We'll start Jeff Aboussie. You might be the best person at this table to know. Claire McCaskill running for governor. Kraski's put it out. It's almost his weekly subject he writes about. Is Claire McCaskill running for governor?
Scott, I don't know whether she's a candidate for governor, but I will tell you, like I said earlier, I think women are going to play a very, very important role in this state's politics from the presidential race on down. It has not been conveyed to us that she's in this race or
endorsed
not.
Attorney General Costa already, right?
Well, the building trades haven't. The Missouri the AFL-CIO has made an early endorsement for Attorney General Costa. Again, if he would have a change of heart, naturally that would make us revisit that particular topic. But right now, it's still a question out there.
Jane Dueker, is this happening?
I see no evidence that it's really happening. I know that there's a lot of Republican talk because I think the idea that there would be an intra-party fight is always attractive to the other side. I'm sure we love when, the Republicans talk about primaries. I mean, that's fun, but, right now I think we have a lot of really pressing issues that are sort of keeping everybody, I think, close to the vest right now. And so I don't expect...
you don't know either?
I don't know either, and I don't expect that we'll know for a little while longer.
Representative? What are you hearing?
I mean, you hear, of course, talk in the background about what may or may not happen, but I think if Senator McCaskill does jump in, she's definitely the Goliath in a Democrat primary. I mean, she's been involved for years. She has been able to raise the money, make the connections, but where she may be the Goliath in a Democrat primary, she may also be, may be great for the Republicans to see her in a general election.
Joe, is there anything in Republican statewide politics, past history, that would make them this lucky?
I haven't been doing this a long time, but we've usually been on the other end of these primaries. So I, for one, am very supportive of a robust Democrat primary.
Jeff Aboussie, Jane Dueker, Representative Keeney, Joe Lakin, thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us this week in Missouri Politics. We will see you after the holidays every week here on ABC 30.
Thanks for joining us, Scott.